Cosmological YouTubers, I am the Sceptical Leprechaun, and welcome to the channel where we get drunk on reason. In my last video, we explored the Aristotelian origins of the cosmological argument. We saw that this argument is composed of three simple premises which indicate, or some would argue, point in the direction of the existence of God. What follows in this video is a deconstruction of the potential flaws and fallacies contained within these premises. So if you're ready, sit back, relax, and let's start philosophizing. Sorry, I couldn't say that and keep a straight face. Premise number one is an arguably incontrovertible claim. The claim being that all things which exist, or all things that move, have an original source of motion. With this premise in mind, you might be surprised to find out that my first issue with Aristotle's argument is in fact his first premise. His first premise is an assertion. An assertion is a claim for which no evidence is provided. Now, while it might seem fairly reasonable to suggest that all moving things have an original source of motion, the fact of the matter is this: the claim that all things have an original source of motion is a claim that needs to be justified. It might seem pedantic to argue in this way, but it's very important that we challenge this claim. Sure, it seems reasonable to point out that things have a source of motion. In fact, I would go so far as to say that everything which has ever been explained has been discovered to have an original source of motion. So why am I not willing to grant the first premise? Why am I not willing to grant that all things have a source of motion? Some of you watching will no doubt have concluded at this point that my contention is nothing more than masturbatory philosophizing. But as any student of science, or more specifically a student of quantum mechanics, will tell you, the notion that all things have a source of motion is something that has yet to be proven. It all boils down to this: the universe, as of yet, has not been explained. Sure, we know the origin of our universe. The Big Bang theory explains this. But what caused the Big Bang? What happened before? Some have pointed out that it doesn't even make sense to ask what happened before the Big Bang. The word before supposes the existence of time and space, but we know that time and space came into existence at the moment of the Big Bang. With these points in mind, my rejection of Aristotle's first premise should start to make sense. Suffice to say, the conclusion that the universe has an original source of motion is a premature one. And that brings us to premise number two, the idea that this original source of motion must be unmoved by anything else. Again, I would argue that this premise fails. I mentioned in my previous video that humans struggle with the concept of infinity. This struggle is evident in Aristotle's second premise, where he suggests that the first cause would be unmoved by anything else, thereby avoiding the problem of an infinite regress. But has this problem simply been invented by human beings? The human struggle with the concept of infinity does not constitute a rebuttal for such an idea. Why can't the universe be infinite? Any theistic appeal to the ridiculousness of the concept of infinity can also be applied to the concept of God. Is it not the case that theists often argue in favor of an infinite God? It seems to me that any discomfort with the notion of an infinite universe is a discomfort that should be equally applied to God. So, in the context of this argument, there are two possibilities. Either we have an infinite universe, or we have an infinite God. The question is there any good reason to lean in the direction of God? Occam's razor tells us that the simplest answer is usually the correct one. Phrased differently, it is often suggested that we should not multiply entities beyond necessity. So let's look at those two options again. An infinite universe requires only one entity, namely the universe. The theistic explanation requires both a universe and a God. This God, of course, is often presented as an omnipotent, omniscient, and omnibenevolent being. So you tell me which explanation is the most simple: an infinite universe, or a universe caused by a magical being which has more in common with Superman than most comic book characters? In conclusion, let's take a look at Aristotle's final premise. This is the premise where, needless to say, Aristotle concludes that God is the explanation. It's important to point out here that Aristotle was in fact a deist. A deist is someone who does not believe in a personal God. Rather, they believe in an all-powerful being who got everything started, but after that fact, left humans to their own devices. This is contrary, however, to most theists who adopt this argument. Thinkers such as Thomas Aquinas and William Lane Craig use this argument to argue in favour of a personal God, a God who answers prayers and performs miracles and sends their only begotten Son to die for the sins of humanity. There's a problem here. Even if I grant Aristotle's first two premises, leading inevitably to the conclusion that a God exists, this argument still doesn't get us to the Christian God, or the Muslim God, or the Hindu gods, or any other God hypothesis that has ever been suggested. So it seems to me, on the basis of all of the fallacies that I've identified, that Aristotle has failed to prove even a deistic God's existence. And that brings us to the end of the video. If you like the video, leave a like. If you dislike the video, leave a dislike. For anything else, please leave a comment below. I have been the Sceptical Leprechaun. I hope you liked the video. Thank you very much for watching. Slán go fóill.